The oak-paneled courtroom smelled of lemon polish and old secrets. I sat 3 rows back, invisible as always, while Mom's manicured fingers stroked Lydia's perfect blonde hair. Dad's nod was slow final. "Your sister deserves it all," Mom hissed loud enough for the front pew. Lydia's smirk flashed like a blade. I didn't flinch. I'd waited 47 years for this moment. Judge Sam's gavel cracked once. Silence swallowed the room. He slid open the sealed addendum, thick cream paper, Granddad's wax seal still intact. "In the event trust is betrayed," he read, voice steady, "the entire estate house trusts every dime transfers immediately to the contingent heir." Mom's champagne flute slipped shattering on marble. Dad went corpse white. Lydia clutched her chest like the air had been sucked out. Every head swiveled. Every stare burned into me. The judge met my eyes. Evelyn Marie Thompson. My smirk finally broke free. But that was just page 1. What comes next? A 10-year-old cassette that predicted this exact betrayal. A lunchbox hidden in a 1978 freezer. A mother's drunken diary. A sister's suicide note. And the offshore account no one knew existed. Stick with me for the next 90 minutes. You'll watch greed collapse, lies combust, and a forgotten daughter rise until the final twist leaves you cheering through tears. The will was only the beginning. The revenge. That's the masterpiece. My name is Evelyn Marie Thompson. 47 years old, a high school librarian in the same small Ohio town where I was born. I've spent 3 decades shelving other people's stories while mine stayed quietly on the bottom rack, unnoticed, unborrowed, gathering dust. That changed the Tuesday Granddad's will was read. The probate courtroom smelled of lemon oil and nervous sweat. I took the last pew, the one with the wobbly leg, because nobody ever expects the quiet sister to sit up front. Mom Ruth perched in the first row like a broody hen, one hand smoothing Lydia's honey blonde hair, the other clutching Dad's sleeve. Lydia, 39, real estate agent extraordinaire, wore a charcoal suit sharp enough to slice bread and a smile that said she'd already counted every zero in the estate. Dad Walter kept his eyes on his shoes the way he had since the stroke 3 years ago. His left hand trembled. His right stayed limp in Mom's grip. Judge Sam Whitaker, silver-haired and kind-eyed, had known Granddad since VFW bingo nights. He cleared his throat and the room hushed the way it does before a storm. Before we proceed with the primary bequests, he said there is a sealed addendum executed 10 years ago and witnessed by counsel. He produced a cream envelope. Granddad's red wax seal cracked but intact. Mom's spine straightened. Lydia's manicured nails dug into Dad's forearm. I felt the shift before the words left the judge's mouth, the way you sense rain in your joints. He unfolded the single sheet. Should any beneficiary breach the sacred trust placed in them through fraud, coercion, or misappropriation, the entire principal of the Thompson Family Trust, including the residents at 412 Maple Lane, shall immediately vest in the contingent heir. He paused, letting the silence stretch until it squeaked. That contingent heir is named herein as Evelyn Marie Thompson. Mom's gasp ricocheted off the paneled walls. Lydia's head snapped toward me so fast her earrings whipped like tiny lassos. Dad's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound. The handful of cousins and neighbors twisted in their seats, a slow-motion wave of disbelief. I stayed still, hands folded in my lap the way Granddad taught me when the world tilted. Breathe through the nose, out through the mouth. Wait for the next card. Judge Sam wasn't finished. There is one additional item. He reached beneath the bench and lifted the old walnut picture frame Mom had insisted on displaying Granddad in his navy dress blues 1944. Something rattled inside. The judge turned it over, unscrewed the back, and a microcassette slid into his palm like a secret escaping. Mr. Thompson instructed that this be opened only if the addendum was invoked. Mom found her voice first. That's ridiculous. He was senile the last 5 years. Lydia echoed contingent heir Evelyn. She can't even manage the library budget. Dad just stared at the cassette as if it might bite. I stood slow, deliberate, and walked the aisle I'd never been invited to cross. My sensible flats clicked against the marble. When I reached the bench, Judge Sam handed me the tape. It was warm from his grip. A yellowed label in Granddad's spidery script read, "Day I signed. Play if they forget." The courtroom deputy produced a dusty portable player from evidence lockup. We all waited while he threaded the tape. Static crackled, then Granddad's voice strong as the day he taught me to bait a hook. "If you're hearing this, somebody broke the rules. I'm betting on Evelyn to fix it. She's the only one who never asked for a dime." Another pop of static. Then a younger voice, Lydia, maybe 19, laughing in the background of what sounded like a summer barbecue. "When they're gone, Derek and I take everything. The house, the accounts, all of it. Evelyn won't even notice until it's too late." The tape clicked off. Lydia's face drained to the color of printer paper. Mom's hand flew to her pearls. Dad finally looked up and for the first time in years straight at me. His eyes held something I couldn't name, regret maybe, or fear. Judge Sam closed the folder with a soft thud. "Court is adjourned until counsel reviews the recording and supporting documents. Ms. Thompson Evelyn, please remain." I nodded, clutching the cassette like a winning lottery ticket. As the room emptied in a rustle of whispers and shuffling feet, Mom hissed over her shoulder, "This isn't over." Lydia's glare could have melted steel. Dad lingered, longest mouth working soundlessly, then followed them out. I stayed behind with Judge Sam and the echo of Granddad's voice. The tape hissed, then Lydia's teenage voice. "I'll take everything when they're gone." The courtroom doors had barely clicked shut when Judge Sam handed me off to Marion Caldwell, Granddad's estate attorney for the last 30 years. She was 63, wore her silver hair in a low knot, and carried the same leather briefcase she'd used since I was in pigtails. "Conference room," she said, voice calm as Sunday tea. "We're not done." I followed her down the narrow hallway lined with dusty portraits of long-dead judges. My fingers still curled around the microcassette, its plastic edges digging into my palm like a promise. The conference room smelled of burnt coffee and old paper. Marion locked the door behind us, set the briefcase on the oak table, and clicked it open with the precision of a surgeon. Inside lay a yellow legal pad, a fresh cassette sleeve, and the portable player the deputy had used. She didn't waste time. Your grandfather left instructions. If the addendum triggered play, the companion tape immediately. She slid the original cassette back into the player, pressed play, and Granddad's voice filled the small space again, softer this time, like he was leaning over my shoulder. "Marion, give Evelyn the full context. She'll need it to understand what comes next." The tape rolled on. Background noise shifted, crickets, the clink of ice in glasses, the low rumble of a summer grill. Then Lydia, 19, and already certain of her place in the world, her voice bright with cheap wine and cheaper ambition. "Derek, listen. Once Mom and Dad are out of the picture, the house is ours. The trust, the savings bonds, even Granddad's stupid coin collection. Evelyn won't fight. She never has. We'll have her signing whatever we put in front of her before she finishes her tea." Derek's laugh was low approving. And the old man, he's got one foot in the grave already. Lydia again sharper now. Let him. The will's ironclad. He changed it after Evelyn's divorce, remember? Said she needed protecting. We'll protect her right into the guest room. The tape hissed, then clicked off. Marion let the silence settle. I felt it in my teeth. 10 years ago, I'd been 37 freshly single licking wounds in the apartment above the library. I'd had no idea my little sister was already mapping the floor plan of my future. The door rattled. Mom's voice seeped through the wood. "Marion, open up. That tape is ancient history. Lydia was a teenager." Marion didn't move. She waited until the rattling stopped, until Mom's heels clicked away in defeat. Then she turned to me, eyes steady. "Your mother will say it was just talk. Kids boast." But Granddad heard something different. He heard intent. I swallowed. He kept this for a decade. He kept everything. Marion reached deeper into the briefcase and produced a second cassette. This one in a clear plastic case with a handwritten label in Granddad's shaky late-stage script. Second Trust. Open only with tears. He recorded this 6 months before he passed. Said the first tape was the warning. This one is the map. I stared at the label. Tears. Granddad had always hated crying in public. He'd called it wasting good salt water. Yet here was his instruction plain as day. Marion continued. He told me the second trust isn't in the main estate. It's separate. Hidden and triggered by a specific condition. He wouldn't tell me the condition. Only that Evelyn would know when the time came. Footsteps again in the hallway, heavier this time. Dad! His voice was muffled, apologetic. Marion, I need to talk to my daughter. Marion shook her head, though he couldn't see. She lowered her voice. Walter hasn't looked me in the eye since the stroke. Guilt does that to a man. I thought of Dad in the courtroom, his gaze fixed on his shoes while Lydia preened. I thought of the way he used to lift me onto his shoulders at county fairs. How his hands had trembled the last time he tried. Marion pressed on. Granddad knew Lydia's ambition wasn't a phase. He saw Derek circling like a vulture the day your sister brought him home. That barbecue. It was the 4th of July 10 years ago. You were in Columbus finalizing your divorce. Lydia thought you were too broken to notice. I closed my eyes. I had been broken. I'd come home that weekend with a U-Haul full of thrift store furniture and a heart held together with library tape. Lydia had hugged me all sympathy, then whispered to Derek behind the garage. I had thought it was about wedding plans. Apparently it was about burial plots. Marion ejected the first tape and slipped it into an evidence envelope. This goes to the judge tomorrow. Its admissible chain of custody intact. But the second tape, she held it up to the light. This one stays with me until you're ready. Granddad was clear, no one hears it until the tears come. Whose tears he wouldn't say. I reached for it. She pulled back. Not yet. There's a key. He said you'd know where to look, same as you always did when you were little, and he hid Easter eggs in the strangest places. Her eyes softened. He trusted your memory, Evelyn. Not your mother's. Not Lydia's. Yours. The room felt smaller suddenly, very warm. I could still smell the charcoal from that long-ago barbecue taste the lemonade Mom had spiked with vodka. I could see Lydia in her red bikini, Derek's hand on the small of her back. Both of them glancing toward the house where Granddad sat on the porch watching. He'd been watching all along. Marion snapped the briefcase shut. I'll file a motion to authenticate the first tape. Your family will fight it, claim coercion, senility, anything. But Granddad covered his bases. He had me notarize the date, the witnesses, even the weather report that day. Sunny, 82 degrees, slight breeze from the west. She smiled, small and sad. He wanted you to know he was lucid. He wanted you to know he chose you. Dad knocked again, softer. Evelyn, please. His voice cracked on my name. I pictured him standing there, shoulders rounded, the man who used to carry me piggyback, now afraid to meet his own daughter's eyes. Marion waited. I shook my head. Not yet. She slipped the second tape into a wall safe behind a framed photo of her late husband. The click of the lock was final. Find the key, she said, before someone else does. Because if Lydia's been planning for 10 years, she's already looking. I left the conference room with the echo of my sister's younger self ringing in my ears, a prophecy recorded on a summer night when I was too heartbroken to notice the storm gathering overhead. Marion locked the tape in her safe and said, "Find the key before someone else does." I left Marion's office with the taste of old charcoal still on my tongue and the word key rattling around my skull like a marble in a tin can. The courthouse parking lot baked under the late September sun heat, shimmering off the asphalt, but I barely felt it. My mind was already back at 412 Maple Lane, sifting through decades of half-forgotten corners. Granddad had loved riddles the way other men loved baseball. He'd plant clues in plain sight and watch us scramble like chickens after cracked corn. Freezer surprises, he used to say, winking over the rim of his coffee mug. best place to hide something nobody wants to find. I drove home on autopilot, the cassette's prophecy looping behind my eyes. Lydia at 19 already carving up the future. Me at 37 too busy patching bullet holes in my heart to notice the survey lines being drawn across my childhood bedroom. The house looked smaller than I remembered. White clapboards, sun-bleached to the color of old bone, the maple tree out front dropping its first red leaves like warnings. Mom's sedan was gone. Dad's pickup sat crooked in the driveway, driver's door ajar. Lydia's sleek SUV was nowhere in sight. Good. I needed the place empty. The side door stuck the way it always had. I shouldered it open and stepped into the kitchen. The air smelled of lemon dish soap and the faint mildew that never quite left the corners. The refrigerator, an avocado green Westinghouse vintage 1978, stood exactly where it had since Carter was president. Mom had threatened to replace it a dozen times, but Granddad always vetoed her. Still keeps beer cold, he'd grunt, and that was that. I ran my hand over the curved handle cool metal under my palm and felt the years peel back like onion skin. I opened the door. A single light bulb flickered, illuminating half a jar of pickles, a carton of eggs, and the ghost of Sunday roasts. Nothing looked out of place, but Granddad never made it easy. I pulled out the crisper drawers, checked behind the ice trays, even unscrewed the butter compartment. Nothing. Then I remembered his favorite trick, the false back panel. He'd shown me once when I was 8 after Mom hid my Halloween candy in the pantry. People look where they expect, he'd whispered, tapping the freezer wall. Surprises live where nobody wants to stick their hand. I opened the freezer. Frost feathered the edges. The ancient ice cube tray rattled like loose teeth. I reached past the frozen peas and felt along the back wall until my fingers found the seam. A gentle push, a click, and the panel swung inward on a hidden hinge. There, nestled in a nest of freezer burns, sat my old lunchbox pink plastic with a faded My Little Pony sticker, the one I'd carried to 3rd grade. My breath fogged in the cold. I lifted it out carefully, frost crystals drifting to the linoleum like snow. The latch was rusted shut. I carried the box to the kitchen table, grabbed a butter knife, and worked the clasp until it gave with a reluctant squeal. Inside lay a single brass key, small and ornate, the kind that opened old diaries or music boxes, and a folded note in Granddad's handwriting. The paper was stiff with cold, the ink slightly blurred but legible. Marion keeps your mother's diary. Find it before the ink dries. I stared at the words until they blurred. Mom had kept diaries when we were kids. Little leather books with tiny locks filled with grocery lists and bridge scores, and the occasional dramatic sigh about Dad's long hours at the plant. I hadn't seen one in decades. I'd assumed she'd tossed them during one of her cleaning frenzies. Apparently not. The screen door creaked. Dad shuffled in, shoulders hunched, eyes fixed on the floor. He stopped when he saw the lunchbox recognition flickering across his face like a match struck in the dark. "Where'd you find that?" His voice was gravel. "Freezer," I said. "Granddad's surprise." He nodded slowly as if that explained everything and nothing. "Your mother's gonna have a fit when she hears you've been digging through her things." He glanced at the key, then away. "Never saw any diary. Not once." I believed him. Dad had never been the one to hide secrets. He was the one secrets hid from. I slipped the key into my pocket, the metal warming against my thigh. "Marion has it," I said. Granddad made sure. Dad rubbed the back of his neck the way he did when the arthritis flared. "Lydia's on her way. Said she's bringing Derek to inventory the house before the bank does." His gaze flicked to the lunchbox again, lingering on the faded pony. "Sentimental junk," he muttered, echoing words I hadn't heard yet. "That's what she'll call it." I closed the lid gently, the plastic clicking shut like a time capsule. The key felt heavier now, a small planet in my pocket. Somewhere in Marion's office, behind the framed photo of her late husband, lay a diary that might hold more than bridge scores. And somewhere in this house, Lydia was already measuring curtains for rooms she thought were hers. I stood lunchbox under my arm and headed for the door. Dad called after me, voice cracking. "Evelyn." I paused. "Be careful. Your sister? She doesn't lose gracefully. I didn't answer. I was already thinking about the diary, about blank pages and promises made in the dark. I was thinking about a little girl who used to hide her candy in the freezer because her big sister never looked there. The diary's first page dated 1985. Lydia made me sign a blank page tonight. I drove straight from Maple Lane to Marion's office, the lunchbox riding shotgun like a passenger from 1985. The diary waited in the safe, but Marion had texted, "Bring the key." I clutched the small brass piece so tightly it left teeth marks in my palm. The late afternoon light slanted through the windshield, turning the brass the color of old pennies. I kept hearing the diary's first line, a ghost sentence that hadn't even been read yet. Lydia made me sign a blank page tonight. A 5-year-old couldn't make anyone do anything, which meant the hand guiding the pen belonged to someone else entirely. Marion met me at the door, took one look at my face, and ushered me past the receptionist. The safe clicked open. The diary slid out like a sleeping cat. It was smaller than I remembered. Burgundy leather cracked along the spine, the tiny lock long since sprung. Marion laid it on the blotter between us. Granddad said, "Open it with me present." Chain of custody. I nodded, throat dry. The brass key fit the diary's clasp as if it had been waiting 38 years for this exact moment. I turned to the first marked page, October 12th, 1985. Mom's handwriting looser than now, the loops of her Y's and G's swimming from too much Chardonnay. Lydia had a fever 102 and wouldn't stop crying. Derek, 22, home from state on fall break, said he knew a shortcut for medical bills. He poured Mom a third glass, told her to sign the blank page just in case. I was at the library until 9, shelving returns. When I got home, Mom was asleep on the couch, Lydia burning up in her crib, and Derek was gone. The page was blank except for Mom's shaky signature. I thought it was nothing. I thought wrong. I read it aloud, my voice cracking on the word, nothing. Marion's pen scratched across her legal pad, taking notes without looking up. When I finished, she slid a manila folder across the desk. Fast forward 38 years. Same signature, same blank page now filled in. Inside were bank records from First National stamped 2 weeks ago. The document was a power of attorney dated 1985, granting Derek Thompson irrevocable authority over the Maple Lane property. The once blank space now held a mortgage in Derek's name alone, $412,000 secured by the house interest accruing at 7.9%. Mom's signature sat at the bottom, identical to the diary scan Marion had overlaid on her screen. I stared until the numbers blurred. The house. Granddad's house, the one he'd paid off in 1973, was underwater because of a cocktail napkin promise made when Reagan was president. Marion tapped the screen. Derek filed this with the county recorder last month. The bank approved the loan in 48 hours. No appraisal, no co-signer. Just that ancient blank page. The office door opened without a knock. Mom stood there, coat half-buttoned, cheeks flushed from the wind or something stronger. She took in the diary, the bank papers, the key on the blotter. Her gaze settled on me like a verdict. Evelyn. One word, thin as onion skin. Marion rose. "Ruth, this is a client meeting." Mom ignored her eyes on the diary. "I thought it was for Lydia's college," she whispered. The sentence floated between us, fragile as the paper it had ruined. Derek said the forms were complicated, that the bank needed something on file from when she was little. "I signed again last week." He said it was routine. Her voice cracked on routine the way ice splits before it gives. I found my own voice small but steady. "You signed the house away, Mom." To Derek. She swayed, caught the doorframe. He promised it was temporary. Interest-only payments until Lydia closed her next big sale. A tear tracked down her cheek, carving a clean line through powder. I believed him. Marion's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, frowned. "Security feed from your home system uploaded to the cloud last night. Derek must have triggered the motion sensor." She turned her laptop so we could both see. The footage was grainy, time-stamped 11:47 p.m., 6 days ago. The camera faced the downstairs powder room. Mom stumbled in mascara, streaked, clutching a pen. Derek followed, blocking the lens with his shoulder. His voice came through tinny but unmistakable. Sign again. Mom. Same spot. We're almost there. Mom's recorded self obeyed, handshaking so badly the pen skittered across the paper. Derek steadied her wrist, guiding the signature like a child tracing letters. When it was done, he folded the page, kissed her forehead, and said, "Good girl. College fund's safe now." The screen went black. In the office, Mom aged 10 years in 10 seconds. She sank into the nearest chair, coat pooling around her like shed skin. "I thought I was helping," she repeated, softer, as if volume could erase the truth. Marion closed the laptop. That footage, combined with the diary and the forged mortgage, is enough for criminal charges. Fraud, elder abuse, forgery. She looked at me. "But it starts with you deciding how far this goes." I stared at Mom's trembling hands, at the diary open to 1985, at the bank papers that turned a childhood home into collateral. Somewhere in the silence, the brass key cooled against my thigh. Security footage from last week. Ruth sobbing in the bathroom. Derek's voice off camera. Sign again, Mom. I stood in Marion's office with the echo of Derek's voice still crawling under my skin. Sign again. Mom, when she shut the laptop and said, "We go public tomorrow. Open court. No more shadows." Mom's face had gone the color of old ash. She kept staring at the frozen frame on the screen as if she could unsign the paper by sheer will. I felt the brass key in my pocket like a hot coal. Marion was already dialing the clerk, requesting an emergency hearing. "Tell Judge Sam we have exculpatory and inculpatory evidence that can't wait," she said, crisp as winter air. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the porch swing at Maple Lane, listening to the house creak, its old complaints rehearsing the moment the walls would finally speak. Morning came gray and damp. The courthouse steps were slick with rain. Reporters huddled under umbrellas, smelling blood. Marion had leaked just enough to the local station new evidence in Thompson estate dispute. Mom arrived, flanked by Lydia and Derek, all three in matching navy, a united front that cracked the moment they saw me waiting beside the bailiff. Lydia's eyes were puffy. Derek's jaw worked like he was chewing glass. Mom wouldn't look higher than my shoes. Inside, the gallery filled fast. Neighbors who'd known Granddad since the war, cousins who'd come for the free lunch, the pastor who'd baptized both Lydia and me. Judge Sam took the bench at 9, sharp gavel falling like a guillotine. Counsel for the contingent heir has filed a motion to present newly discovered evidence. Proceed. Marion stood, heels clicking. Your Honor. We offer into evidence a cloud-stored security recording from the Thompson residence time-stamped 6 days ago. She nodded to the clerk, who dimmed the lights. The projector hummed. The powder room feed filled the wall. Mom's recorded self stumbled in mascara rivers down her cheeks. Derek's silhouette blocked half the frame. His voice calm and oily. Sign again. Mom. Same spot. We're almost there. The pen scratched. Mom's sob leaked through the speakers like a confession. The room inhaled as one. Derek shot to his feet. Objection. Deepfake. AI garbage. Anyone can splice audio these days. His lawyer, a slick kid from Columbus, scrambled to echo him. Marion didn't flinch. We anticipated the claim, Your Honor. We've retained an independent forensic technologist. Dr. Patel, a soft-spoken woman from the university, took the stand. She wore a cardigan the color of oatmeal and spoke like she was calming a spooked horse. The file's EXIF data is intact. The camera is a 2018 Nest model firmware version 5.5.3, last updated by Walter Thompson himself. The audio waveform shows no compression artifacts consistent with generative AI. The metadata hash matches the cloud backup taken at 11:49 p.m. on the date in question. She clicked her remote. Side-by-side graphs bloomed on screen, original versus known deepfakes. The original sat alone, pristine. In short, this is the genuine recording. Derek's face went the shade of spoiled milk. Lydia gripped the rail so hard her knuckles blanched. Mom began to cry without sound, shoulders shaking like a child left in the rain. Judge. Sam's gaze swept the room. Lingered on Derek, then on me. The court finds the recording authentic and material to the question of breach of trust. He lifted a pen, signed the order with a flourish. Effective immediately. All transactions involving the Thompson Family Trust, the residence at 412 Maple Lane, and any accounts in the names of Ruth Walter Lydia or Derek Thompson are frozen pending full forensic accounting. Bailiff served the parties. The gavel cracked again. The gallery erupted in murmurs. Derek lunged toward the aisle, but the bailiff was faster, paper in hand. Lydia's mouth opened, closed, opened. No words came. Mom reached for her, but Lydia jerked away as if burned. Court adjourned in under 20 minutes. Marion gathered her files, calm as a surgeon closing. Phase 1 complete, she murmured. I followed her out, the brass key still burning a hole in my pocket, the taste of justice sharp on my tongue. That night, Lydia swallowed pills. Her suicide note, I signed the blanks to protect Mom. The hospital corridor smelled of bleach and burnt coffee, the kind of scent that clings to your clothes long after you leave. I found Lydia in ICU room 3, a curtain half drawn around her bed, monitors beeping like impatient metronomes. Her skin was the color of printer paper, lips cracked and colorless. But her eyes, those sharp hazel eyes that had always sized up rooms before entering, were open and fixed on the ceiling. A nurse had called me at dawn, overdose, charcoal lavage, stable but sedated. The suicide note lay folded in my purse, its single sentence burning a hole through the leather. I signed the blanks to protect Mom. I pulled the plastic chair closer, the legs scraping linoleum. Lydia's gaze shifted to me, slow as a rusted hinge. You came, she rasped, voice raw from the tube they'd pulled hours earlier. I nodded, unsure what to say to the sister who'd spent a lifetime measuring my worth in square footage. She tried to lift her hand. The IV line tugged and she winced. Water. I held the straw to her lips. She sipped, coughed, sipped again. When she spoke, it was barely above the ventilator's sigh. Derek has a daughter. 22. He used Dad's medical fund to keep her quiet. The words landed between us like a dropped tray. I leaned in, certain I'd misheard. A daughter. Lydia's eyes closed, then opened glassy with morphine, and something older, regret maybe. College girl. Cleveland. Derek paid tuition, rent, everything. Took it straight from Dad's long-term care account. I found the statements last year. Her laugh was a dry rattle. Thought I could fix it. Thought if I moved money around, nobody would notice. I sat back, the chair creaking under me. Dad's medical fund, set up after the stroke, meant for in-home aids, and the lift chair he never used was supposed to be ironclad. Granddad had overseen every deposit. I opened my mouth to ask how, but the door swung open. The nurse who entered was young, ponytail swinging scrubs the color of storm clouds. She froze, mid-step chart in hand, when she saw me. Her eyes, wide gray-green, framed by lashes too long for hospital lighting, were Derek's eyes. The same tilt at the outer corners, the same flicker of calculation. My pulse stuttered. She recovered first, busying herself with the IV bag, but her hands trembled as she adjusted the drip. Lydia watched her, a bitter smile tugging at her cracked lips. That's her, she whispered. She's the one who cashed the checks. The nurse's head snapped up. For a second, the room held only the beep of monitors and the soft hiss of oxygen. Then she set the chart down, movements deliberate, and reached into her pocket. She pulled out a folded receipt, thick paper embossed with a jeweler's logo, and let it flutter onto Lydia's blanket. Found this in the nurse's lounge, she said, voice steady but thin. Someone's been using your name, Ms. Thompson. I unfolded the paper. It was a purchase receipt for a diamond tennis bracelet, $4, $200, dated 3 days ago. The signature at the bottom was Lydia's looping scrawl, except Lydia had been unconscious in this very bed since the overdose. The nurse met my eyes. Derek's eyes, and for the first time I saw fear in them. Not guilt. Fear. Lydia's monitors beeped faster. Tell Mom, she rasped. Tell her I tried. Her hand found mine, cold and paper-thin. I signed to protect her. Derek said if I didn't, he'd make sure she went to jail for the mortgage. I thought... Her voice cracked. I thought I was the smart one. I stared at the receipt at the nurse whose name tag read K. Thompson RN at my sister, who had swallowed a bottle of pills to shield the mother who'd always shielded her. The room tilted the way it does when you stand up too fast. The nurse backed toward the door, ponytail brushing her collar. I have to check on Mr. Jenkins, she muttered and fled. Lydia's grip tightened. Find her, she whispered. Before Derek does. Her eyes fluttered shut, the morphine pulling her under. I sat there long after the monitors settled into their steady rhythm, the diamond receipt clenched in my fist, the weight of a secret niece pressing against my ribs like a second heartbeat. The nurse dropped a diamond receipt signed Lydia, but Lydia was unconscious that day. I left the hospital with the diamond receipt folded so tightly it cut a line across my palm. Lydia's forged name staring up like an accusation. Marion met me in the parking lot, took one look at the paper and said, "Emergency hearing tomorrow, 8 a.m. Bring everything." I spent the night in the library's back office, the only place in town still open past midnight, poring over Dad's medical fund statements until the numbers blurred. Every withdrawal traced back to the same Cleveland address, the same account ending in 7742. By dawn, I had a name, Kayla Thompson, age 22, nursing student. Derek's daughter. My niece. The girl with his eyes who'd fled Lydia's room. The courthouse was already humming when I arrived, reporters camped on the steps like crows. Marion had subpoenaed a handwriting expert, a retired FBI document examiner named Harold Klein, who still wore the same horn-rimmed glasses he'd had in the 80s. He took the stand with the calm of a man who'd testified in 1,000 courtrooms and never lost his temper once. Marion handed him the diamond receipt and a stack of known samples, Lydia's real estate contracts, Ruth's grocery lists, even a birthday card Ruth had signed for Dad last year. Harold adjusted his microscope light. The signature on the receipt is a skilled simulation of Lydia Thompson's hand, but not hers. Note the pressure patterns, heavier on the downstrokes, lighter on the upstrokes, consistent with a left-handed writer compensating for right-handed mimicry. He projected enlarged images side by side. Compare the terminal flourish on the capital L. Lydia's is a confident loop. This one hesitates, then overcorrects. Classic forgery by someone familiar, but not fluent. He paused, letting the room lean in. The forger is Ruth Thompson. Mom gasped from the front row, a sound like air escaping a punctured tire. She stood, knees buckling, and would have hit the floor if the bailiff hadn't caught her elbow. I forged it, she choked out, voice cracking across the gallery. I forged it so Lydia wouldn't go to jail. The words hung in the air, raw and ragged. She clutched the rail, knuckles white. Derek said the jeweler would press charges if the signature didn't match. I practiced for hours. I thought if I made it look like Lydia, they'd blame her insurance, not her. I thought I was saving her. Derek leaned back in his seat. Arms crossed, a smirk curling the corner of his mouth like he'd just won a bet. His lawyer whispered something. Derek shook his head, still smiling. He thought Mom's confession was a gift, one more layer of chaos to hide behind. Marion didn't blink. Your Honor, the state requests an immediate warrant for Derek Thompson on charges of embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy. She slid a thick folder across the bench. Judge Sam flipped through it, eyebrows climbing. Harold Klein had already matched Derek's handwriting to the withdrawal slips from Dad's medical fund, the same looping D, the same heavy cross on the T. The judge signed the warrant without hesitation. The bailiff stepped forward, paper in hand. Derek Michael Thompson, you are under arrest for embezzlement in excess of $500,000. Derek's smirk froze, then shattered. He surged to his feet, chair scraping backward. This is insane! You have nothing! The bailiff was already behind him, cuffs glinting. Derek twisted, eyes wild, scanning the gallery for an escape that wasn't there. You'll never prove it, he spat, but his voice cracked on prove. Outside the courthouse, police cuff. Derek, he shouts. You'll never find the offshore account. Derek's shouts still rang in my ears as the courthouse doors swung shut behind me. the echo of offshore account swallowed by the slam of police cruisers pulling away. I stood on the wet steps, rain needling my face, watching the taillights disappear around the corner. Marion appeared at my elbow, umbrella tilted against the downpour. "He just handed us the map," she said, voice low. "Come inside before the reporters swarm." I followed her back through security, past the metal detectors that beeped at the brass key I still carried like a talisman, into the same conference room where everything had begun to unravel. She locked the door, opened her laptop, and pulled up a secure portal I'd never seen before. Derek's arrest triggered an automatic flag with the Cayman trustee. They're required to notify the estate attorney when a beneficiary is charged with financial crimes. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. A new account bloomed on screen, labeled in plain text, Compassion Clause Trust. The balance read $4,237,891.42. I blinked, certain the numbers would rearrange themselves into something sensible. They didn't. Marion leaned back, letting me absorb the figure. Granddad moved the bulk of his assets offshore in 2011 after Lydia started pressing him to co-sign her real estate loans. He told me it was insurance against family stupidity. The main estate, the house, the checking accounts, the coin collection was left intact as a decoy. What Lydia and Derek drained was smoke. She clicked deeper. Monthly transfers, small but consistent, had flowed from the Cayman account into the medical fund Derek later siphoned. He was robbing Peter to pay Paul, never realizing Peter was the real vault. I traced the screen with one finger, afraid to smudge the truth. $4.2 million. Enough to rebuild the house fund, 100 scholarships, erase every debt my parents had ever whispered about in the kitchen after midnight. Marion scrolled to the trust declaration, a single paragraph in Granddad's spidery hand, scanned and notarized. The beneficiary must demonstrate an act of mercy toward one who has proven undeserving, documented, and witnessed before any distribution may occur. Failure to satisfy the clause within 1 year of the testator's death reverts the corpus to a charitable foundation for caregiver education. I read it twice, the words settling like stones in my stomach. Mercy to the undeserving. Lydia's face flashed in my mind, pale in the ICU bed, rasping about protecting Mom. Derek in cuffs, still sneering. Mom's forged signature trembling on diamond receipts. Granddad had built a moral tripwire, and I was the only one left standing on the right side of it. Marion closed the laptop. The main estate is bankrupt. Derek's mortgage, Lydia's credit lines, the medical fund raids, they wiped it clean. The house goes to auction next month unless the compassion clause is invoked. She met my eyes. 4.2 million, Evelyn. But only if you choose mercy. The room felt suddenly airless. I thought of Lydia swallowing pills to shield Mom, of Mom forging jewelry slips to shield Lydia, of Derek laughing all the way to an offshore vault that turned out to be a mirage. Granddad had seen every move before the board was even set. I opened my mouth, closed. It opened it again. What happens if I say no? Then the money funds nursing scholarships in perpetuity. The house is sold. Your family gets nothing. Marion's voice was gentle, but the choice was a blade. Granddad trusted you to decide who deserves a second chance. We left the conference room together, the weight of the trust settling on my shoulders like a cloak woven from every kindness I'd ever shown, and every slight I'd ever swallowed. Judge Sam was waiting in chambers, the Cayman documents already spread across his desk like a winning hand. He looked up, eyes kind but unyielding. The offshore trust is valid, Ms. Thompson. The compassion clause is enforceable. He tapped the balance sheet. $4.2 million less fees. The main estate is insolvent. He paused, letting the silence stretch. Evelyn, the money is yours, unless you choose to share with Lydia. Judge Sam's words hung in the oak-paneled chambers like a verdict without a sentence. I felt the $4.2 million trust breathing behind me, warm, and waiting while the bankrupt shell of the main estate crumbled in the foreground. Marion closed the folder with a soft snap and said, "We reconvene tomorrow, 9 sharp. Bring your decision." I walked out, past the reporters, past Mom's tear-streaked face in the hallway. past Lydia's empty wheelchair parked by the elevator, and drove home through streets that suddenly looked too narrow for the choice I carried. The next morning, the courtroom was packed again, but the air felt different, thicker, expectant, as though the walls themselves leaned in to listen. I took my place at the petitioner's table, the brass key now retired to a velvet pouch in my purse, its job done. Judge Sam entered, robes sweeping, and nodded once. Ms. Thompson, the compassion clause requires a witnessed act of mercy. The court is prepared to receive your proposal. Before I could speak, Mom rose from the gallery. She had traded her usual pearls for a simple cardigan, hair pulled back in a way that made her look 10 years younger and 20 years more fragile. She walked the aisle on unsteady legs, then dropped to her knees in front of me right there on the worn carpet. The room inhaled. "Evelyn," she said, voice trembling but clear. "Give Lydia therapy money, nothing more. Inpatient, the best program, whatever it costs. I'll sign the house over to the bank today if that's what it takes. Just don't let her disappear into the system. Please." Her hands clutched the hem of my skirt, knuckles white. I looked down at the woman who had spent my childhood measuring love in square footage, and found only a mother terrified of losing her favorite child. I gently pried her fingers loose and helped her to a chair. The bailiff hovered, unsure whether to intervene. Judge Sam simply waited. Lydia was wheeled in next, pushed by a court deputy because her own legs still betrayed her. She wore hospital scrubs under a denim jacket, face scrubbed clean of the makeup armor she usually wielded. The wheelchair stopped beside Mom. Lydia's eyes, hazel bloodshot, ringed with exhaustion, met mine without the old calculation. "I'll take the stipend and disappear," she said, voice hoarse but steady. $6,000 a month wired to whatever facility you choose. I'll sign a waiver relinquishing any claim to the house, the coins, anything left in the main estate. You'll never have to see me again after today." She swallowed hard. "I just want out of the spiral. Therapy, a clean slate, a chance to stop being the person who hurt you." The gallery murmured. A cousin in the back row dabbed her eyes with a tissue. I felt the weight of every gaze, every whispered memory of birthday parties where Lydia got the bigger slice every Christmas, where my gift was an afterthought. Granddad's claws burned in my chest, mercy to the undeserving. I stood. "Your Honor," I began. "The compassion clause demands mercy, not martyrdom. I propose the following to be drafted into a binding addendum." Marion slid a legal pad toward me. I wrote as I spoke, the pen steady. "Lydia Thompson receives a fixed monthly stipend of $5,000 for the duration of a 2-year accredited inpatient rehabilitation program, followed by 5 years of outpatient therapy. All funds are administered by a court-appointed trustee. Upon successful completion, the stipend reduces to $2,000 monthly for life, indexed to inflation. Any relapse voids the agreement." I paused, looked at Lydia. She nodded, tears tracking clean paths down her cheeks. I continued. "Ruth Thompson's debts are paid from the trust medical credit cards, the second mortgage she co-signed without understanding. The Maple Lane house is deeded to a nonprofit foundation for caregiver housing with preference given to low-income aides. Walter Thompson receives a lifetime residency cottage on the property rent-free." Then I turned to the empty chair where Derek would have sat if he weren't in county lockup. "Derek Thompson is excluded entirely. No funds, no visitation, no contact. His embezzlement proceeds are forfeited to the trust. The offshore account he bragged about will be clawed back through federal forfeiture." Judge Sam's pen scratched across the order. Mom sobbed quietly into her hands. Lydia reached for her, and for once, Mom let her. The gavel fell approval, not finality. Marion gathered the signed pages, then almost as an afterthought slid a final envelope across the table. The paper was thick, the seal unbroken, the handwriting on the front, unmistakably Granddad's "For Evelyn from Kayla." Marion's eyes held mine. One last tape from the girl Derek abandoned. I stared at the envelope Marion had slid across the table, Granddad's handwriting stark against the cream paper, "For Evelyn from Kayla." The courtroom had emptied. Only the bailiff lingered, pretending to straighten chairs while he listened. My fingers trembled as I broke the seal. Inside lay a microcassette smaller than the others and a single folded note in Granddad's spidery script. I set the note aside and handed the tape to Marion. She produced the portable player from her briefcase, the same one that had carried Lydia's teenage prophecy weeks ago. The click of the lid sounded louder than the gavel. Static hissed. Then a young woman's voice, clear and steady despite a faint tremor. Ms. Thompson. Evelyn. This is Kayla. I'm 20 years old, a senior at Cleveland State Nursing Program. You've been paying my scholarship since I was 12. Anonymous donor account, 4472. I know because the financial aid office finally let me see the file after I threatened to drop out. A pause, the soft intake of breath. Derek Thompson is my father. He left when Mom was 6 months pregnant. She raised me on night shifts and food stamps. Your money bought my books, my uniforms, the bus pass that got me to clinicals. I thought I'd never meet you. Then I saw the news about the will, and I recognized the address on Maple Lane. I'm the nurse who cared for your dad last spring. I'm the one who found the forged checks. I pressed a hand to my mouth. The voice continued softer now. I'm testifying tomorrow. Federal prosecutor. I have the bank records, the tuition receipts, the texts where Derek bragged about robbing the old man blind. I'm sorry it took me this long to speak up. I was afraid. But you taught me without ever knowing my name that kindness doesn't need recognition. I'm ready to finish what you started. The tape clicked off. The silence that followed was deeper than any courtroom hush. I unfolded Granddad's note with shaking hands. The ink was faded, the paper creased from years in an envelope. The circle closes when the merciful meet the lost. Below it, a single line. She carries your blood and your heart. Evelyn, trust the mercy you've already shown. Marion closed the player gently. Kayla's been in the gallery every day, she said. Back row scrubs under a blazer. She wanted to wait until the clause was satisfied. I turned, scanning the empty benches, but the bailiff was already locking the doors. Marion smiled small and knowing. She'll be at the federal courthouse tomorrow. Grand jury. Derek's arraignment is at 2. I drove home through streets glazed with October dusk, the note and the tape on the seat beside me like passengers from a future I hadn't dared imagine. The house on Maple Lane looked smaller in the twilight, its windows dark, the for sale sign already staked in the yard. I sat in the driveway a long time, engine ticking as it cooled, replaying Kayla's voice. 20 years old. Nursing student. My niece. The child Derek had abandoned, raised on the scholarships I'd funded through the library's silent donor program, money I'd skimmed from birthday checks, overtime pay, every extra shift I could beg. I'd never known the recipients' names. Granddad had insisted on anonymity. Let the goods stand alone, he'd said. The next morning, I arrived early at the federal building, a concrete monolith that smelled of floor wax and desperation. Kayla was waiting in the corridor, ponytail, neat eyes, the exact gray-green of Derek's, but softer, steadier. She stood when she saw me, clutching a manila folder thick with printouts. Ms. Thompson, she began, then stopped, cheeks flushing. I practiced this 100 times. I reached out, touched her elbow. Call me Evelyn. Her shoulders relaxed a fraction. We walked to the grand jury room together, her sneakers silent beside my flats. Inside, the prosecutor laid out the timeline tuition payments from Dad's medical fund, routed through a Shell LLC, then into Kayla's scholarship account. The same account I'd seeded anonymously. Kayla took the stand, voice unwavering as she matched dates, signatures, IP addresses from Derek's phone. When she finished, the room was silent, except for the scratch of the court reporter's keys. Afterward, in the echoing hallway, Kayla hesitated. There's something else. She opened the folder, pulled out a photograph, a little girl in a graduation cap, gap-toothed smile, holding a certificate. That's me, age 6. First scholarship ceremony. You weren't there, but your name was on the plaque. She turned the photo over. On the back, in child scrawl, "Thank you, Mystery Angel." I traced the letters with one finger. Granddad's circle closing after 20 years. Kayla's eyes filled. "I want to know you," she said. "If you'll let me. If you'll..." The girl steps forward. "Call me granddaughter. I'm ready to come home." Kayla's words, "Call me granddaughter," echoed through the marble corridor of the federal courthouse as we walked out together. Her hand brushing mine for the first time, tentative but warm. The air outside was sharp with November chill leaves skittering across the plaza like scattered secrets. I wanted to hold on to that moment to ask her about her favorite color, her first day of clinicals, the way her mother took cream in her coffee, but Marion's text buzzed against my hip. Judge Sam wants final compassion clause order signed today. I squeezed Kayla's fingers, once promised coffee tomorrow, and drove back to the county courthouse where the rest of my fractured family waited. The hearing was brief, almost ceremonial. Judge Sam had cleared the gallery except for immediate parties. Even the reporters were barred. Lydia sat in her wheelchair at the respondents' table, hair pulled back, face scrubbed clean, eyes fixed on the floor. Mom stood behind her, one hand resting lightly on the chair, as if steadying herself more than Lydia. Dad was absent, too frail for the trip, the nurse said, but his power of attorney lay signed and notarized on the bench. Marion laid out the addendum I'd drafted the night before. Pages crisp, language airtight. I rose when called. "Your Honor, pursuant to the Compassion Clause, I move to activate the trust as follows." My voice didn't waver. Lydia Thompson is enrolled immediately in the Cedar Ridge Residential Rehabilitation Center, a 2-year program specializing in addiction and family systems therapy. The trust will fund 100% of costs, room board, medical counseling, plus a modest living stipend of $5,000 monthly during treatment, reducing to $2,000 upon discharge contingent on quarterly clean drug screens and program compliance. Any violation terminates the stipend permanently. Lydia looked up, then eyes wide but not defiant. She nodded once, a small, grateful dip of her chin. The judge's pen scratched approval. Marion slid the enrollment contract across. Lydia signed with a hand that no longer shook. Next page. Ruth Thompson's outstanding debts. Medical bills, credit lines, personal loans totaling $112,000 are paid in full from trust principal. No further claims may be filed against her. Mom's shoulders sagged. A sob escaped, but she pressed her lips together, refusing to let it grow. I continued. The residence at 412 Maple Lane is deeded to the newly formed Thompson Caregiver Foundation. The property will be sold at fair market value. Proceeds establish an endowment. First priority for purchase or lease goes to certified home health aides and public school teachers earning under $50,000 annually. Walter Thompson retains life estate in the detached cottage, utilities included. Judge Sam initialed each clause, the sound of justice rendered in ink. The final page was thinner, almost an afterthought. Derek Michael Thompson is excluded from all trust benefits. His prior embezzlement, as established in Federal Case 24 CR 187, forfeits any equitable interest. The judge looked up. Sentence was handed down this morning in Cleveland. 7 years federal prison, no parole for the first 5. Restitution ordered $4.1 million to be garnished from any future earnings. 7 years. The number settled over the room like frost. Lydia closed her eyes. Mom whispered a prayer I couldn't quite hear. I felt nothing triumphant, only the hollow click of a door closing on a decade of damage. Court adjourned with a tap of the gavel. Lydia was wheeled out first, headed to Cedar Ridge by ambulance transfer. Mom followed, pausing to touch my sleeve. "Thank you," she said, the words small but steady. I nodded, unable to trust my voice. Marion gathered the signed originals, then, from the bottom of her briefcase, produced a single blank check, heavy stock, the trust's name embossed in navy. She laid it on the table between us, pen beside it like an offering. "One unsigned check left," she said, smiling for the first time in weeks. "From the scholarship fund you never knew you controlled." I stood in the emptying courtroom with Marion's unsigned check between my fingers, its blank face staring up like an uncharted map. She tucked the rest of the trust documents into her briefcase, then produced a slim, leather-bound ledger I'd never seen. "Granddad kept duplicates of every donation you routed through the library's silent fund," she said. "He called it your quiet ledger. I think it's time you read it." The cover was worn soft, the spine cracked from years of handling. I opened it under the fluorescent lights and the first stub fluttered loose. 2003 $1,200 anonymous EMT. The recipient line read, "Maria Alvarez Senior Nursing Track." My breath caught. Maria had been my first. I'd found her crying in the stacks over a textbook she couldn't afford. I'd slipped the money into the donation box that night, heart-hammering, praying it would reach her. Page after page unfolded like petals. 47 stubs, each one a story I'd buried. 2005 $800 for Jamal's trumpet lessons after his mom lost her job at the plant. 2007 $2 $100 for twins whose father died in Iraq, covering SAT prep so they could aim past community college. 2012 $3,000 for a boy named Luis, whose mother cleaned the library at night. The stub noted art supplies, "Don't let him quit." I'd watched Luis sketch superheroes on scrap paper while his mom mopped. Every dollar had come from overtime skipped vacations, the inheritance Granddad quietly funneled into my checking account with a wink and a spend it wisely. I'd spent it on futures I never claimed. Marion turned to the final entry dated 3 months ago. The amount $18,000. Recipient Kayla Thompson, BSW, candidate, Cleveland State. The memo line read, "Final semester plus licensure fees." My knees buckled. Kayla Derrick's daughter, the nurse with his eyes and my stubborn chin, had graduated summa cum laude last week. She'd sent a thank you card to the anonymous donor care of the library. I'd filed it without opening it, afraid to see my own handwriting echoed back. Now she was a licensed social worker assigned to the county's foster care division, helping kids whose parents had vanished the way Derrick had vanished from her life. I closed the ledger throat tight. Marion touched my elbow. "Your father asked to see you. He's in the cottage." The detached in-law suite behind Maple Lane had been finished the week Granddad died, a cozy one-bedroom with wide doorways and a ramp Dad swore he'd never need. I found him in the recliner, oxygen tubing curled like a transparent snake across his lap, the TV muted on a fishing show. He looked smaller than memory-allowed plaid shirt, hanging loose where muscle used to be. He muted the remote when I entered, eyes watery but sharp. "Sit," he said, patting the ottoman. I obeyed. He reached for a manila envelope on the side table, hands trembling. Inside were photocopies of every scholarship stub, edges yellowed, some annotated in his shaky scrawl. Evelyn paid for this one, told her it was library budget. Another. She worked doubles so this kid could go to prom. He laid them across my lap like a deck of cards, revealing every quiet ace I'd played. Tears tracked down his cheeks, carving clean lines through afternoon stubble. "You raised everyone but yourself," he whispered, voice cracking on the last word. "I sat in that big house letting your mother parade Lydia like a prize pony, and you kept the whole town afloat on coffee money and stubbornness. I'm sorry, Evie. I should have stood up sooner." I gathered the stubs, pressed them to my chest. "You're standing now," I said. He managed a watery smile, then pointed to the envelope's bottom flap. A single blank check remained identical to the one Marion had given me, drawn on the same scholarship subaccount. "Granddad left instructions," Dad said. "One unsigned check to be filled by the donor herself for any purpose she chooses. No limits." I stared at the empty line until it blurred. 47 lives touched, one still waiting. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. Unknown number, local exchange. I answered on instinct. A woman's voice, young but sure, spilled through the speaker. "Grandma Evelyn. This is Maria Alvarez. I'm the first baby you saved the nursing scholarship 2003. I'm a pediatric nurse practitioner now. Can I visit? I have someone I want you to meet." A new voice on the phone. "Grandma Evelyn. I'm the first baby you saved. Can I visit Maria?" Alvarez's voice still rang in my ears. "Can I visit?" When I hung up and stared at Dad across the cottage living room, the unsigned check trembling between my fingers like a leaf caught in wind. He wiped his eyes with the sleeve of his flannel and said, "Go home, Evie. The town's waiting to eat crow, and they brought Tupperware." I laughed, the sound startling us both, and tucked the check into the ledger beside the 47 stubs that had become my secret biography. The drive to Maple Lane took 5 minutes, but the street looked different in the late afternoon light, as though someone had wiped a decade of dust from the windows. Cars lined both curbs, hazard lights blinking like nervous fireflies. My porch, once bare except for a single Adirondack chair, was now a buffet. Mrs. Kowalski from down the block balanced a Pyrex of Golumpki on her hip. The Hendersons carried a sheet cake iced with "Sorry, Evelyn" in shaky blue letters. Mr. Patel from the pharmacy juggled 2 foil-covered trays of butter chicken. They formed a ragged queue up the front walk, faces I'd known since kindergarten, now flushed with the particular embarrassment of people who'd believed the wrong story. I stepped out of the car, and the line parted like the Red Sea in reverse. Mrs. Kowalski reached me first, eyes wet. "We were awful," she said, pressing the casserole into my hands. "Derek told us you were contesting the will out of spite that you'd put your parents in a home." We listened. One by one, they came apologies wrapped in aluminum foil in quilted potholders in the careful language of neighbors who'd crossed the street to avoid my gaze for weeks. The Hendersons confessed they'd returned my Christmas cookies unopened last year. Mr. Patel admitted he'd filled Lydia's prescriptions without question while refusing my over-the-counter requests. Each confession landed soft but heavy, stacking like bricks until the porch sagged under the weight of contrition. Pastor Reynolds arrived last collar askew, clutching a lemon meringue pie like a peace offering. He waited until the casseroles were arranged on every flat surface, then cleared his throat. "Evelyn," he began, voice cracking on the second syllable. I stood in my pulpit and repeated Derek's lies. Said you were ungrateful, that you'd forgotten family values. I let fear of losing tithes cloud my judgment. He set the pie beside a tray of stuffed cabbage. "I'm here to ask forgiveness in front of the flock I misled." The neighbors murmured agreement, a low rustle of shame and relief. I looked at the sea of faces, people who'd watched me grow up, who'd bought raffle tickets for library fundraisers I'd organized, who'd nodded politely when Lydia bragged about her commissions, and felt the knot in my chest loosen, not from absolution, but from the simple honesty of being seen. A white van pulled up, Cedar Ridge logo discreet on the side. The driver helped Lydia down the ramp, her steps tentative but unassisted. She wore jeans and a hoodie, hair in a simple ponytail, no trace of the power suits that once armored her. The crowd stilled. Lydia scanned the porch eyes, skipping over the food until they landed on me. She walked the gauntlet of neighbors without flinching, though her hands worried the hem of her sleeve. When she reached the steps, she stopped 2 feet away. "I checked myself in this morning," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Voluntary commitment, 90 days to start. The stipend you set up covers it, and I signed the relapse clause without argument." She swallowed. "I don't expect casseroles. I just wanted you to know I'm keeping my word." Mrs. Kowalski started forward with a plate, but Lydia raised a palm. "Not yet. I haven't earned it." She met my eyes steady for the first time in years. "Thank you for the chance. I'll try not to waste it." The silence that followed was gentle, almost reverent. Pastor Reynolds stepped forward. "Pie forgotten." "May I pray?" he asked. Lydia nodded. We bowed our heads while he asked for healing, for humility, for the strength to make amends one day at a time. When he finished, Mr. Patel pressed a container of chicken into Lydia's hands. "Protein helps the brain," he said gruffly. She took it, eyes shining, and the van driver helped her back inside. The porch exhaled as the vehicle pulled away, taking my sister toward whatever version of herself waited on the other side of treatment. The neighbors began to disperse, promising recipes, promising to return the dishes clean, promising things they finally meant. I stood amid the avalanche of foil and forgiveness, the ledger tucked under one arm. Dad's unsigned check still blank inside. A courier bike screeched to a stop at the curb, helmeted rider juggling a padded envelope, and a familiar pink rectangle. He jogged up the steps, dodging Tupperware. Evelyn Thompson. Sign here. I scrawled my name. He handed over the package, a dusty lunchbox. My Little Pony sticker half-peeled marked, property of Evelyn Evidence Lockup. The courier tipped his helmet. Found in evidence lockup, returned to owner. I stood on the porch with the dusty lunchbox in my hands, its plastic warm from the courier's grip, the faded pony sticker curling at the edges like a secret trying to escape. The neighbors had gone, taking their empty promises and full Tupperware, leaving only the faint scent of butter chicken and lemon meringue in the air. I carried the box inside, past the kitchen table, still crowded with casseroles, and set it on the counter beneath the window where Granddad used to peel apples while telling me stories about Navy ports he'd never actually visited. My fingers found the rusted latch, the same one I'd pried open in the freezer weeks ago, and it gave with a reluctant squeak. Inside the main compartment lay a single Polaroid, edges scalloped and yellowed, the colors bled soft by time. 5-year-old me grinned up from a patchwork quilt, gap-toothed and sunburned, holding a dandelion crown Granddad had woven during a picnic at the county fair. My overalls were grass-stained, my hair a wild halo. Tucked beneath the photo was a note in Granddad's late-stage handwriting, the letters trembling but deliberate. You were always the real inheritance. I traced the words with one finger, feeling the indentations where the pen had pressed too hard, as if he'd known I'd need the pressure to believe it. I turned the photo over. On the back, in the same ink, opened the pony's belly. I flipped the lunchbox, found the small seam along the plastic horse's underside, and eased it apart. A second compartment, hidden since childhood, revealed a folded document sealed in a plastic sleeve. I slid it out. The deed to 412 Maple Lane, recorded 6 months before Granddad's death, bore a single transfer notation: property conveyed to the Evelyn Marie Thompson Scholarship Foundation, an irrevocable charitable trust. The signature line at the bottom was blank except for Granddad's flourish, and a notary stamp dated the day he'd taught me to bait a hook with a single worm and infinite patience. The back door creaked. Mom stepped in, coat draped over her arm, eyes red-rimmed but dry. She took in the lunchbox, the photo, the deed, and her shoulders squared as if she'd rehearsed this moment in the car. Marion called, she said. Said the foundation paperwork is ready. She pulled a pen from her purse, the same one she'd used to sign grocery lists and permission slips, and laid it beside the deed. I'm signing over my share. No protest. No conditions. Her voice was steady, the way it used to be when she read bedtime stories before Lydia learned to demand encores. I watched her hand move across the page, the loops of her R&T smaller, now careful. She dated it, initialed the margin where Granddad had left a tiny star, and slid the document back to me. The house was never mine to keep, she said. It was yours to give away. She didn't hug me. We weren't there yet. But she rested her palm on the lunchbox for a long moment, fingers brushing the pony's faded mane, then turned and walked out the screen door, sighing shut behind her. I stood alone in the kitchen, deed in one hand, photo in the other, the weight of 47 years settling into something lighter than resentment. The foundation's bylaws, drafted by Marion, approved by Judge Sam, were already filed. Proceeds from the sale would seed an endowment, first residence chosen by need, and service the cottage reserved for Dad until he no longer needed it. I tucked the photo into the ledger beside the scholarship stubs, the deed into the plastic sleeve, and closed the lunchbox with a soft click. Granddad's final message wasn't money or property. It was permission to let the past rest. A knock at the door startled me. Marion stood on the threshold, briefcase in hand, a small smile tugging her mouth. First resident approved, she said, stepping aside. Lydia waited on the ramp. No wheelchair now, jeans rolled at the cuffs, a Cedar Ridge lanyard around her neck. Her hair was shorter, her eyes clearer. Peer counselor certification starts Monday, she said. They offered me the cottage while I train, if it's okay. She gestured toward the foundation sign already staked in the yard. Thompson's Scholarship House, opening spring. The foundation's first resident, Lydia, now a peer counselor. Lydia's quiet announcement that she would live in the cottage as the foundation's first resident settled over the porch like the last note of a hymn, simple, true, and impossible to ignore. I watched her walk the gravel path to the small house duffel bag slung over one shoulder. The Cedar Ridge lanyard catching the late sun, and felt the years of resentment loosen their grip, not gone, but transformed into something I could carry without bleeding. Spring arrived early that year, dogwoods blooming pink against the white clapboards of Maple Lane, and with it came invitations, a thick cream envelope from Cleveland State, Kayla's name embossed in gold. The graduation ceremony was held in the university's old auditorium, the one with the creaking wooden seats and the mural of justice painted during the Depression. I arrived early, hood folded over my arm, the navy velvet heavy with the weight of what it represented. Kayla had asked me to hood her, a tradition usually reserved for faculty or family mentors, and the dean had agreed without hesitation once Marian explained the scholarship history. I stood backstage, heart hammering, while names were called in alphabetical order. When they reached Thompson, Kayla rose, the auditorium lights caught the copper highlights in her hair, the same shade Derek's had been before prison grayed it. She crossed the stage in her black gown, tassels swinging, and stopped in front of me. I lifted the hood, the social work insignia stitched in silver thread, and draped it over her shoulders. Her eyes, Derek's eyes but softer, met mine. "Thank you." She whispered the words meant for more than the degree. I fastened the clasp at her throat, my fingers brushing the pulse that beat steady and strong. The audience applauded, but I heard only the click of the velvet settling into place, the sound of a circle completing another turn. The reception was held on the lawn, white tents fluttering in the breeze. Kayla found me near the punch bowl diploma, clutched like a shield. "There's someone who wants to speak," she said, leading me to the podium. Lydia stood there, no lanyard now, just a simple linen dress and the quiet confidence of 90 days clean. She tapped the microphone feedback, squealing once before settling. "I'm Lydia Thompson," she began, voice clear across the grass. 6 months ago, I was in a courtroom, wheelchair-bound, facing the sister I'd spent a lifetime undermining. Today, I'm a peer counselor at Cedar Ridge, certified and sober, because that sister showed me mercy when I deserved none. She looked straight at me. I learned mercy from the sister I betrayed. Evelyn funded my treatment, gave me a stipend, and trusted me to earn the cottage I now call home. Every resident who walks through the Thompson Scholarship House will know her name not as a donor, but as the woman who proved second chances aren't weakness, they're strength. The crowd murmured approval. Kayla squeezed my hand. I felt tears threaten but blinked them back. This wasn't about me. Lydia stepped down and the dean took the mic to announce the first cohort of foundation residents, teachers, and aides who would live rent-free while finishing degrees. I spotted Mrs. Kowalski's daughter among them, the one who'd cleaned the library at night to put herself through night school. Later that afternoon, I drove Dad to the cottage, his few belongings packed in 2 grocery bags and a cardboard box labeled Walter in Mom's careful script. The ramp was new, the paint still tacky. Inside, the space smelled of fresh drywall and lemon polish. A hospital bed sat by the window overlooking the dogwoods, a flat screen mounted opposite a recliner positioned for maximum sunlight. Dad shuffled an oxygen tank rolling behind him like a faithful dog, and stopped in the center of the room. "It's bigger than the bedroom I shared with your mother for 40 years, he said, voice thick. He eased into the recliner, adjusted the footrest, and looked out at the yard where Lydia was planting herbs along the fence. Trust paid for all this, I nodded. He closed his eyes, a single tear tracking into the crease of his smile. Good. Let it keep working. I left him napping, the cottage door locking softly behind me. Back at the library, my temporary home since the house sale, I sorted mail on the circulation desk. Amid the usual flyers and overdue notices lay a single letter postmarked 2003. The envelope yellowed and readdressed 3 times. I slid it open with a letter opener shaped like a miniature sword, a gift from a long-ago summer reading program. Inside was a child's drawing, a stick figure angel with wings made of dollar bills, a refrigerator in the background. Below, in crayon, "To the angel who paid my tuition, meet me at the old fridge." A letter arrives postmarked 2003. "To the angel who paid my tuition, meet me at the old fridge." I stood behind the circulation desk with the crayon angel's letter trembling in my hand. The words "Meet me at the old fridge" glowing like a dare from 22 years ago. The postmark 2003 matched the first scholarship stub in Granddad's quiet ledger, the one that started everything. I locked the library at dusk, drove the familiar streets now lined with foundation banners fluttering in the May breeze, and pulled into the driveway of what had once been 412 Maple Lane. The house wore a new sign, Thompson Scholarship Residence, Estand, 2025. The 1978 Westinghouse fridge stood on the back porch, relocated from the kitchen during renovations, its avocado paint scrubbed clean door propped open with a brick to air out the must. Kayla waited beside it, rocking a bundled infant in a carrier slung across her chest. The baby was tiny, pink-cheeked, a wisp of dark hair curling above a knit cap. Kayla's eyes, Derek's eyes, but warmed by exhaustion and wonder, met mine as I climbed the steps. "She's 3 weeks old," she said, voice soft with the hush new mothers carry. "We named her Ruth Evelyn, after the women who taught me family isn't just blood." She shifted the carrier, revealing the original lunchbox cradled in her other arm, its plastic polished to a shine, the My Little Pony sticker replaced with a fresh decal Scholarship Fund ST. 2003. I took the box, the weight familiar yet heavier, as though it had absorbed every secret it ever held. Kayla lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in acid-free tissue, lay the brass key, the 1985 diary page, the Polaroid of 5-year-old me, and a final micro-cassette labeled in Granddad's hand. "Play when the circle is full." She produced a small player from her diaper bag, the same model Marion had used, and pressed play. Static crackled, then Granddad's voice, frail but steady, the last recording before the stroke stole his words. "If you're hearing this, the house is gone, the money's spent, and someone's standing by that old fridge with a new life in their arms. The circle is complete when love outlives greed. Evelyn, you were never the spare. You were the seed." The tape clicked off. The baby stirred, a small fist escaping the blanket. I reached out, brushing the downy hair, and felt the decades collapse into this single breath. Kayla lifted Ruth Evelyn from the carrier, settling her into my arms. The infant's weight was nothing and everything, her warmth seeping through the cotton onesie. Kayla opened the lunchbox's false bottom, revealing a tiny velvet pouch. Inside, a single gold coin, the one Granddad used to flip for ice cream decisions. "For her college fund," Kayla said. "Or her first heartbreak. Whatever she needs." We stood in silence, the fridge humming its ancient song behind us, the porch light flickering on as dusk deepened. Lydia appeared in the doorway, apron dusted with soil from the herb garden, eyes bright with 6 months of clarity. She took in the baby, the lunchbox, the coin, and smiled the way she hadn't since we were children, racing to the swing set. Dad shuffled out next, cane-tapping oxygen tank left inside. He peered at the infant, then at me, and nodded once, the gesture carrying every apology he'd never spoken aloud. Kayla tucked the tape back into the lunchbox, closed the lid, and set it on the fridge shelf where the butter compartment used to be. "Time capsule," she said, "for the next resident who needs to remember where they came from." She kissed Ruth Evelyn's forehead, then mine. "We'll plant a tree tomorrow. Dogwood. For every graduate." The baby cooed, a small, perfect sound that filled the evening like a bell. I bent close, breathing in milk and new beginnings, and whispered, "Welcome home, little heir." The baby's coo lingered in the warm May air as I held little Ruth Evelyn close, her tiny fingers curling around my thumb, the 1978 fridge humming its old tune behind us, like a guardian of every secret it had ever kept. Kayla's smile was soft, Lydia's nod steady from the doorway. Dad's eyes shining with a peace I'd never seen in him before. The lunchbox sat on the shelf now, a time capsule sealed with a gold coin and a lifetime of quiet choices. Granddad's final words. "The circle is complete when love outlives greed," wove through my heart, not as an ending, but as a beginning I'd spent 47 years earning without knowing it. I looked at this reborn family, my niece, my sister, my father, this new little heir, and felt the weight of every casserole apology, every scholarship stub, Every tear shed in courtrooms and hospital rooms settle into something unbreakable. I was never the spare. I was the seed, and here was the harvest. If this story moved you, the betrayals, the mercy, the quiet hero who turned pain into possibility, hit that subscribe button right now. Join thousands of viewers who've cried, cheered, and shared their own family dramas in the comments. One viewer wrote, "Evelyn's strength reminded me of my aunt, who raised us alone. Thank you for giving her a voice." Another said, "I forgave my sibling after watching Lydia's redemption. This series healed me." Drop your thoughts below. Have you ever shown mercy to someone who hurt you? What's the one act of kindness you're most proud of? Like, comment, and turn on notifications. We're posting bonus content next week, including the real letters Granddad left behind. Let's keep this circle growing. The baby cooed again. I whispered, "Welcome home, little heir," and the story lives on with you.